Lightsabers, the most iconic weapons in cinema history. But how do they work? Do they make any real sense? Let's have a look, shall we? So lightsabers consist of three main parts: the energy making bit, the energy conversion bit, and the blade making bit. So lightsabers are powered by diatium power cells, which are both naturally recharging and seemingly 100% efficient, in terms of both 100% of the energy it produces goes back into the power cell, and it returns to 100% of the charge that it had at the start. I mean, you never see a Jedi having to recharge their lightsaber after all. So for true 100% efficiency, every bit of energy that the power cell produces would have to be redirected back into itself. So the lightsaber couldn't transfer any energy to anything else. It couldn't give out any noise. It couldn't give out any heat. It couldn't produce any light. You see the problem here? Also, 100% of the energy that is transferred to the battery when recharging itself would have to go back into the battery, which is yet again impossible. Basically, you'd need multiple processes to be 100% efficient for the diatium power cell to work as described. 100% efficiency is never possible. Also, basically the lightsaber couldn't do anything but move, and that's only because that kinetic energy is coming from the person moving the lightsaber, not the battery. Probably the most famous part of the lightsaber is the kyber crystal, which in the new canon is a semi-sentient, force-attuned crystal. The kyber crystal's supposedly focusing the energy from the power cell into creating the blade. Let's just get this part out of the way first. No, rocks aren't sentient. There are no sentient rocks. But the main question here is, what does the focusing energy part of its job even mean? My best interpretation is that it means taking the electrical energy from the power cell and converting it into another type of energy, perhaps? Otherwise, it's just like the crystal is focusing a light beam from the power cell, like some form of overly fancy lens. But that would mean treating a lightsaber like a literal laser sword, which it isn't. But the closest real-life equivalent I can think of to a kyber crystal is a piezoelectric crystal, which are used in ultrasound machines. So when you apply an electrical current to a piezoelectric crystal, they vibrate and then give out sound waves. And conversely, when you apply pressure waves to piezoelectric crystals, they then convert that back into an electrical signal. And this is how ultrasound machines work. So in ultrasound machines, they give out the sound waves that then go into the body. The sound waves then reflect back off of parts of the body into the machine, and then that converts those sound waves back into an electrical signal, which is read by the machine. In an ultrasound machine, the sound waves are directed by an acoustic lens, similar to how the emitter part of the lightsaber seemingly directs the energy or whatever it's doing to create the blade. Now wait, are lightsabers just fancy ultrasound machines? Disclaimer, do not use lightsabers on pregnant women. So, lightsaber blades. So contrary to what some people in the Star Wars universe seem to think,
I'm gonna walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order.
They aren't laser swords. Mostly because lasers don't just randomly stop in mid-air. So the blade is actually made of plasma held in place by an electromagnetic field. But what is plasma? Plasma is the fourth phase of matter. Yes, there are four phases of matter. Yes, your school teachers have been lying to you again. No, that does not mean drugs are cool.
And as for drugs, well, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
Except caffeine. But atoms consist of negatively charged electrons orbiting around positively charged nuclei. But if you apply enough energy, the electrons can be stripped away from their constituent atoms. This creates some form of ionic soup. That soup is plasma. Where can you see plasma in real life? Well, lightning, aurora borealis, the sun, neon lighting, plasma cutters. So neon lighting works by applying an electrical current to a bunch of gas. This strips the electrons away from the atoms, creating plasma. Eventually, the electrons are reabsorbed by their atoms, and that part of the process is what creates the light. So the different colours of neon lights come from using different types of gas inside the lighting. Now obviously there are some big differences between neon lights and lightsabers, mostly that, it's contained within a tube, it isn't used to cut stuff up. So let's look at a plasma cutter. They're used for cutting up metal, something that lightsabers do on a regular basis. So plasma cutters work by sending pressurised gas through a channel with a negative electrode at the end. So when the plasma cutter makes contact with the metal that it is cutting, it creates a circuit, which then creates a spark at the end of the cutter. The spark heats the gas to about 16,000 Kelvin, which is more than enough energy to strip the electrons from the atoms and create plasma. The gas is moving at about 6,000 meters per second as well. The cutter also puts out a flow of shielding gas around the cutting area to protect the plasma, and also to decide how big that plasma beam is. So obviously with using plasma to cut into metal, the plasma being used for lightsaber blades actually has some merit. But overall, bit of a mixed bag. 100% efficient battery? Absolute nonsense. Kyber crystals seem kind of pointless in the design, at least for non-force sensitive people. I suppose they could be used to create some form of light within the lightsaber. Plasma blades, absolutely the bit that makes the most sense. So here's my very rough lightsaber design. For step 1, you have a battery producing electrical energy. This would need recharging even if you were able to redirect some of the waste energy back into the battery. So next, a small portion of that electrical energy can be redirected into the kyber crystals and cause it to vibrate. Perhaps this makes it give out some light energy to give the blade its colour. I mean, I guess it can do some mystical shit as well. So the main part, the electrical current is then applied to a jet of gas, stripping it of its electrons to create the plasma blade. That blade is then held in place by an electromagnetic field. Now, is this some perfect, real solution to create a lightsaber? Absolutely not. It still involves a sentient rock after all. But it's the best that I'm going to pull together. Another disclaimer, don't try making a lightsaber yourself, especially not using any of my crackpot ideas. Just go buy a prop instead.